from her room. She was met by a group of 3 men who had evidently been attempting to win her favor. One of them joyously exclaimed her arrival, addressing her as Saintess and expressing their readiness to accompany her. Intrigued, Dolores inquired about their presence. One of the men eagerly responded, asserting that they had come to offer their assistance to her. Their voices resonated with a genuine desire to support her. They continued, expressing their concern for her well-being, emphasizing their inability to leave such a noble lady alone in a low and dirty place. The men proudly announced their gesture of bringing 3 wagons filled with donations and emergency relief, all the while humorously suggesting that the recipients had won the jackpot that day. However, an underlying mockery seeped into their words, raising questions about whether their excessive aid might undermine the slum dwellers' self-sufficiency. Amid their well-intentioned facade, Saintess Dolores discerned their true motives. She walked serenely past them as the trio declared their intentions to follow her, stating that it was a gentleman's duty to protect a lady. The men pledged their allegiance to her, suggesting that their actions had conveyed their true intent. With a gentle smile, Saintess assured them that she entrusted the task to their capable hands. Seeing this, their faces flushed with excitement, and their hearts skipped a beat in her presence. However, as time passed, the 3 nobles displayed expressions of disgust, struggling to contain their urge to vomit. The pungent smell of the camp, where the priests were tending to those afflicted with the epidemic, had overwhelmed them. They lamented the unpleasant odor and lamented the possibility of their expensive limited edition shoes being tarnished. One of them implored the priests to treat him first, while another fretted about the risk of becoming infected himself. The old noble demanded that the clutter be cleared immediately, expressing an urgent need to depart. Observing the noble's reactions, Saintess remained composed, foreseeing the inevitable outcome of their visit. She mused that it was blasphemous to approach a relief area with ulterior motives. She couldn't help but ponder whether they understood that empathy for the sick was the only essential requirement. For her, the embodiment of godly grace and love lay in absolute and pure altruism, in dogmatic sacrifice, in the voluntary spirit, in kindness, and in tenderness. Her gaze shifted toward another tent, emanating an ominous aura of dark energy. Anticipating the looming horrors within, she recognized that this was where the most critical patients were gathered. Among the sick and the clergy, everyone here would be in pain. Saintess moved toward the tent resolutely and silently sought forgiveness for not being present earlier. Bracing herself, she drew the curtain and declared her intentions to help since she was there now. However, she was met with a jolt of shock as a commanding voice pierced the air, urgently demanding the arrival of more saline. A priest stood in astonishment behind the doctor, witnessing the incredible scene unfolding before him. He found the doctor's method of treatment to be impossible, as according to his knowledge, only divine power should work on epidemic infections. He then marveled at the long hours the doctor had spent tending to these patients by himself. The doctor made a small incision in the infected area with his clinical knife, and then applied divine power by touching the wound with his 2 fingers. Miraculously, the wound immediately healed under his touch, and to the priest's amazement, the infection vanished as well. Contemplating the method employed by the doctor, the priest surmised that instead of merely blessing the skin, the doctor was enabling the direct flow of divine power into the infected area. This sparked a new possibility within the priest, making him realize that he, too, might be able to focus and utilize divine power in a similar manner. The Saintess, closely observing the scene, recognized the doctor as the Night Hound, who was none other than Vikir in disguise. After curing the patient's infected area, Vikir administered some medicine to aid in the recovery. The Saintess regarded him with awe, acknowledging his exceptional skill in both medicine and the use of divine power. With solemn determination, Vikir placed both his hands on the patient's chest and channeled divine power into the afflicted body. He knew that typically divine power was a cleric's prayer reaching a god, which God accepted and transformed into power for the cleric. The quantity of divine power bestowed upon an individual depended on their level of devotion to God, and the amount of divine power was directly proportional to the effort required to perform a miracle. 1 divine power equated to 1 miracle, while 10 divine powers could generate 10 miracles. However, Vikir knew of a method that allowed one to perform 10 miracles with 1 divine power, and 100 miracles with 10 divine powers. Vikir's thoughts delved into the turbulent past as he recalled the time of the fall when an overwhelming number of monsters assailed them, and the number of patients lying before the clerics had surpassed even the count of the monsters. The clerics had realized that the amount of divine power they possessed would not be enough to stop the disaster. master. The decision made by God, due to the desperation and faltering faith of the clerics, was to alter the equation used to perform miracles. The clerics now embrace the philosophy, take measures now and deal with the consequences later, perform miracles first, and address the aftermath afterward. It was a strange phenomenon where they could muster all the divine power they needed, even if the divine power they needed came with interest. People referred to this phenomenon as advanced divine power. Furthermore, it was a time when slaying monsters was deemed an act of faith. Therefore, even non-clerics could use advanced divine power by vanquishing monsters. Because of this, Vikir, who possessed a soul that had accumulated karmic energy from the past, was able to harness divine power within a divine region. Just then, a distressed little girl sat near her ailing mother and burst into tears, crying out for her mommy. Vikir, having completed the treatment of the previous patient, approached the little girl with gentle reassurance and promised to help her mother recover soon. He then handed her a gold coin and acknowledged that her mother was not only sick but also suffering from severe malnutrition. So he advised her to use the coin for food, firewood, and nursing her mother. The priest, who witnessed it all, intervened and mentioned that materialistic assistance was not permitted as monetary demands were endless. He expressed concern that if Vikir did that, he might end up giving all his money to them. In response, Vikir posed a philosophical query, probing the nature of endlessness and the concept of limitless demands. Perplexed, the priest struggled to comprehend the depth of his question. After hearing no response, Vikir continued and stated that there was a limit to how much money was in his pocket, so he could give all he had to the needy without repercussions. He paused for a moment as he gazed upon the sick mother, and then he apologized. Observing this exchange, Saintess Dolores wondered if he had just said he was sorry. She then questioned what he was sorry for and why he was apologizing. Recalling Vikir's earlier statement about theology being an exploration of human understanding, she connected the dots, considering the possible reasons behind his apology. She wondered if his reason was perhaps the same as her own, because, like herself, he too felt remorse for not being able to treat more people. Suddenly, her heartbeat intensified and a loud thump escaped her chest. Saintess Dolores was merely a 16-year-old girl, young and inexperienced. However, at that moment, Dolores' heart started racing for the mysterious man standing before her. After attending to the victims of the epidemic, Vikir sat outside, exhausted. He let out a weary breath and lifted his mask momentarily to take a sip of water. His respite was short-lived as he noticed Saintess Dolores approaching. Acting quickly, he lowered his mask and inquired about her well-being. Saintess settled beside him and asked if she could have a moment to talk. Vikir granted her request, saying that he didn't mind. She expressed her gratitude for his assistance and acknowledged that they had managed to treat all the casualties with his help. Vikir modestly replied that he had merely done what was necessary. Saintess smiled and remarked that she knew he would say that. An awkward silence followed as they had nothing to talk about. Saintess broke the silence, clutching her clothes as she confessed her inner turmoil. She argued that a strong person like him should have been born with divine power. She then honestly mentioned how she had been fortunate to be born with divine power, but lamented the weakness of her body, mind, and faith. She questioned why God had chosen a weak person like her to be a saintess. She argued that there were so many other people who had strong faith even though they weren't born with divine power. Once again, she pondered why God had bestowed upon her the overwhelming title of a saintess. Vikir's response shocked her as he said that the very fact that she was in anguish and guilt was the reason why God had chosen her. A smile appeared on his face as he emphasized that what the world needed was a light that could penetrate even the darkest and most ferocious places. Tears welled up in Saintess Dolores' eyes as she sought reassurance, questioning whether she could become the person who could embody those words. Vikir's response was gentle yet firm, assuring her that she would indeed be able to fulfill that role. The outcome of gathering the Quo Vadis family's clergy in one area for prayer was that all processes involved in the creation of holy water were successful. The result was a divine essence that could purify all those infected within the slums with just one drop. 3 drops of the concentrated holy water were produced and carefully stored. The name given to these drops was Pliny de la Verge, also known as Saintess Tyr. Amid a grand hall, Saintess sat, facing a podium that held a box containing the 3 small empty glass bottles. Initiating her prayer, a radiant divine light began to swirl around the hall. Her voice resonated through the space as she chanted, drawing attention to the woman who had the unique privilege of nurturing God's only son. She spoke of the sleepless nights filled with anguish and her heart's inability to keep pace with the profound sorrow she experienced. She proclaimed the day as the most painful and sorrowful for her. As Saintess concluded her prayer, the divine light descended upon the podium, enveloping it in an ethereal glow. Sometime later, holy knights appeared before her, carrying a box containing the 3 Saintess tears. The holy knight closed the box, expressing gratitude for her efforts, and assured her that they would store it securely in the basement's safe. Saintess Dolores entrusted them with the task, and as they departed, she found herself contemplating her next course of action. A priest stood solemnly before a statue of the goddess, engaged in prayer. Meanwhile, Saintess approached him from behind, addressing him respectfully as father and indicating her intention to report something about the Red Death. The priest called her his fairy and his daughter and told her to come closer. Saintess humbly acknowledged the order and walked towards him. The priest, Cardinal of the Loon Church, Humbert Lun Quo Vadis, placed his hand on her shoulder and with a warm smile commended her for the generous offering she had made this time. Recognizing that it was expected of his daughter, Saintess humbly accepted his praise and acknowledged his generosity. Cardinal implored her to share the details, and Saintess began by outlining their plan to utilize their newly created Saintess tier to cleanse the water flowing beneath Saint Mecca. In response, Cardinal inquired if she had found the source of the infection. Saintess confirmed this and mentioned that it originated from an unregistered well in the slums. She further added that children had testified that a spirit had cursed the well. According to their investigation, the well was severely infected, and they had also found a glass bottle that the criminal used to store and spread the infection. She then presented suspicious objects that were discovered during their investigation. Cardinal looked at the dagger and an emblem placed on the cloth, questioning where they had found these items. Saintess explained that they had discovered them near the well. Cardinal's gaze turned icy as he recognized the emblems of both Leviathan and Bourgeois engraved on the objects. This confirmed their collaboration in creating an artificial virus. A surge of aura engulfed him as he expressed his disdain for those who dared to insult divinity. His words echoed with righteous fury as he declared a holy war against these despicable poison addicts and misers. Saintess maintained her composure despite Cardinal's intense anger, but her demeanor shifted drastically when he mentioned the Night Hound and deemed him suspicious. In a commanding tone, Cardinal demanded that the Night Hound be captured immediately and forced to confess to every detail of his involvement. However, Saintess abruptly interjected, raising her voice to state that the Night Hound was innocent. Taken aback by her outburst, Cardinal regarded her with a questioning look. Saintess fervently argued that the Night Hound had devoted his efforts to treating the infected, emphasizing that his actions had prevented any casualties. She was resolute in her belief that he couldn't possibly be evil. Cardinal then acknowledged that he knew what was going on, but Saintess wore a confused look on her face after hearing this. Cardinal raised his hand toward the sky and remarked that it was all Night Hound's fault for his daughter, who had never gone against him, to utter those words to him, so he decided to personally interrogate him. Suddenly an overwhelming pressure surged around him that caused Saintess to cry out. Soon, a radiant beam of light shot skyward from his hand. The beam trailed up in the sky and then illuminated the entire city in a brilliant divine aura. Cardinal, with an air of finality, declared to Saintess that it was meaningless for her to oppose him, as he had already dispatched the paladins to pursue the Night Hound. In an inn where Vikir had been staying for the past few days, a group of holy knights had gathered outside his room. Communicating through sign language, they strategized their next course of action. With determined resolve, one of the knights forcefully kicked open the door, accusing the Night Hound of being a suspect in the outbreak of the Red Death. However, their words hung in the air, echoing in the empty room as they stood there in shock, realizing that their target was not even there in the first place. Meanwhile, at the location of Saintess Dolores and Cardinal, a priest hurriedly approached them. His voice was filled with urgency as he mentioned that something bad had happened. Cardinal remained calm and questioned him about what had gone wrong. The priest hesitated for a moment and then delivered the distressing news that one of the Saintess tears had disappeared from the basement safe. A bead of sweat trickled down Saintess's face as she pondered if this was the reason Night Hound had come here. Unbeknownst to them, Vikir stood atop one of the city wall watchtowers. He looked down at the Saintess tear in his hand with a smile. After sealing the pouch, he whispered his thanks for this gift. A few moments later, the figure of Vikir standing on the watchtower dissolved into the shadows. Ayan found herself at the precipice of a cliff, bow in hand, facing the menacing presence of a Cerberus. The creature, adorned with arrows, growled ominously. A barbarian, situated behind the Cerberus, shouted in an attempt to divert its attention, But the beast pressed forward toward Ayan, causing her to retreat instinctively. As she stepped backward, the ground beneath her betrayed her, giving way. Losing her balance, she tumbled backward from the edge of the cliff. Plunging downward, she broke through the tree branches in her descent. None proved sufficient to halt her fall, and with a final impact, she landed on the ground below. As Ayan regained consciousness, she heard some voices, but she couldn't decipher their meaning. She struggled to open her eyes, and when she managed to do so, her gaze was met with the sight of two men standing before her. One observed her condition, while the other wore a greedy smile. It became evident that this duo belonged to a merchant group transporting supplies. The discovery of Ayan, injured and prone on the ground, had seemingly interrupted their journey. At an indeterminate time later, Ayan, visibly nervous, gripped a sword tightly in her hand. Behind her stood a confining wooden wall, offering no escape. A raucous crowd, masked and exuberant, cheered loudly, creating an atmosphere of anticipation. Facing Ayan was her opponent, a robust man adorned with battle scars, a sinister smile on his face as he menacingly clacked his fingers, signaling the imminent clash. The air buzzed with tension as the battle commenced, the man charging at her with a thunderous shout, exuding confidence in his imminent victory. Despite her fear, Ayan displayed agility, evading his attack with a swift jump and retaliating with a slash of her sword, leaving a small wound on his shoulder. To her dismay, her opponent, seemingly unfazed, seized her midair by the leg and hurled her forcefully towards the wooden barrier. Ayan collided with the unforgiving wall, blood spraying from her mouth as pain surged through her body, tears welling in her eyes. The observers, hidden behind their masks, erupted in boisterous laughter, finding intense pleasure in the unfolding spectacle of the brutal battle. Her struggle against her formidable adversary was now a source of cruel entertainment for the masked onlookers. Ayan lay on the ground, tears streaming down her face, defeated and broken. Her opponent reveled in his triumph, letting out a victorious shout that reverberated through the arena. In this moment of despair, the silhouette of her mother and family materialized before her, a glimmer of hope amid darkness. Summoning every ounce of strength, Ayan resolved to rise. As she struggled to stand, the attention of the observers shifted back to her. The sight of her defiance captured their interest, and murmurs about her future began to circulate among the onlookers. Finally, Ayan managed to stand, drawing lines on her face with soil covered in blood. Unafraid and fueled by an inner fire, she gazed ahead at her opponent. The arena crackled with anticipation as observers licked their lips, savoring the prospect of an intense battle about to unfold. Now standing tall, Ayan prepared to face her adversary once more, unwavering in her determination to defy the odds. The air buzzed with tension as the stage was set for the next chapter in this brutal spectacle. Some years had passed, and Ayan found herself imprisoned behind steel bars, her eyes reflecting a profound sense of hopelessness. Even the images of her family, once a source of strength, had blurred into a distant memory. Overwhelmed, she closed her eyes, surrendering to the crushing weight of despair. Amid this bleakness, a sudden noise jolted her back to awareness. As her eyes opened, she discovered a glass tube with remnants of elixir lying before her. She recoiled in shock, fear gripping her as she noticed a figure standing before her. This figure was none other than Vikir. He opened her cage door and, in the rough language of the barbarians, instructed her to go. Reality shifted abruptly, and Ayan awoke from this distressing dream with tears covering her eyes. The matriarch looked at her daughter lying on her lap and inquired if she had experienced a nightmare. She then told Ayan that she kept looking for Vikir in her sleep. But the dream was not the only torment haunting her. With a heavy breath and a voice laden with pain, she confided in her mother about the worsening agony. Her chest ached, her body burned, and the sensation that her heart had dried up enveloped her. In a voice weighed down by despair, she questioned if she was afflicted with the Red Death. The pain was so overwhelming that it caused her to regret being born into this world. The matriarch sought to comfort her, gently placing her hand on Ayan's and recounting a tale. A long time ago, she and Ayan's father buried a small seed in the ground. Ayan's father planted the seed, while she watered it every day. Not long after, the seed sprouted, and after several months, it became a healthy and beautiful flower. Subsequently, they harvested the flowers, extracted the sap, and smoked it. They experienced euphoria and had fun, and that was how Ayan came into this world. However, due to her father committing a misdeed, he faced execution at the hands of her grandfather. Ayan, grappling with her deteriorating health, expressed her distress. In response, the matriarch, with a gentle smile, reminded her of the unpredictability of life and the need to endure its challenges. She reassured Ayan, urging her to wait for Vikir's return, convinced that he would find a solution to treat the infection. However, Ayan, in her despondency, rejected the comfort, stating her belief that Vikir wouldn't come back. Just then, a sudden shout from outside shattered the somber atmosphere. The exclamation revealed that Vikir had returned, bringing with him the much-needed medicine. The matriarch's face brightened with a smile as she reassured Ayan, pointing to the truth she had foreseen. However, when she looked down to share her joy with her daughter, she found that Ayan had already bolted outside. The matriarch appeared a bit annoyed and couldn't help but question whether Ayan truly had the Red Death. Meanwhile, fueled by a mixture of desperation and hope, Ayan ran at full speed, her thoughts racing back to the time when Vikir had helped her escape a life of slavery. The moment she witnessed Vikir standing boldly against Madame Eight Legs, she realized that facing one's fears head-on was a powerful force. It was Vikir's example that gave her the strength to stand back up, transcending the depths of her own fears and pain. Finally, Ayan arrived in the midst of the gathered barbarians. Her eyes soon fell on Vikir, who stood before her. Vikir expressed surprise upon seeing her, as he had heard from the warriors that she had contracted the Red Death. However, Ayan didn't respond with words. Instead, propelled by a rush of emotions, she leaped at him with full force, enveloping him in a tight hug. The impact sent Vikir flying backward, crashing to the ground, but she held on to him steadfastly. Vikir questioned her actions, stating that her fervent hug might have broken his back if he hadn't used mana. He then questioned how she could have such force when she had Red Death. Ayan simply stated that as soon as she heard he had returned, her body felt lighter. Confused but relieved, he inquired about her well-being, and Ayan reassured him that she was fine. Vikir then asked if she was just pretending to be fine, to which she nodded in agreement. Ayan then smiled with genuine happiness and welcomed him back. Vikir reciprocated her sentiment, saying, "I'm back." In the confines of a tent, Ahyul lay sick on a bed, her condition evidently grave. By her side sat Vikir, and a group of barbarians stood in the background, concerned expressions etched on their faces. Vikir, determined to aid Ahyul, retrieved a pouch and began to open it. A brilliant golden radiance emanated from the pouch as he held up the Saintess tear in his hand. The golden light cascaded onto Ahyul, who was laboring under heavy breaths. To the surprise of everyone present, the red spots on her body started vanishing. The barbarians erupted in exclamations, marveling at the disappearance of Ahyul's affliction. The potent light from Vikir's offering had seemingly eradicated the Red Death. Their awe was palpable as they acknowledged him as the bringer of the cure. Vikir inquired about the number of patients they had, and Ayan reported that, including Ahyul, there were around 30. Vikir then asked about the situation of other tribes, and Ayan revealed that the situation was really bad. Many other tribes were on the brink of annihilation. Vikir estimated that there should be around 10,000 affected individuals, and he urged her to tell other tribes to gather the sick. Ayan, expressing concern and questioning if there were large quantities of the cure, Vikir assured her that there was an ample supply of the cure, and they could use this opportunity to showcase their capabilities to other tribes. Barbarians, overwhelmed by his deeds, exclaimed in admiration and hailed him as amazing. Vikir focused on practical matters and shifted his attention to another issue. He spoke of a swamp monster named Ka, disclosing that he had defeated it during his journey. Instructing the barbarians to retrieve the monster for sustenance, awe filled the air once again. The barbarians couldn't help but feel that Vikir was truly amazing, realizing they couldn't even compare to him. Vikir redirected attention to the immediate task at hand and urged the tribes to gather around the river catchment area, signaling the need for a swift response. After some time, the diverse barbarian tribes gathered near a river, with Vikir prominently positioned at the forefront. Holding the Saintess tear, Vikir poured it into the river, and from the point of contact, a radiant wave of golden light emanated. Soon, this golden light flowed throughout the entire river, casting a resplendent glow that bathed the surrounding forest. Addressing the tribe leaders, Vikir revealed that all they needed to do was drink the water. The infected individuals, afflicted by the Red Death, began to partake, assisted by others when necessary. Laughter and joy echoed through the air as some marveled at the lightness they felt, while others exclaimed that the Red Death had disappeared, celebrating their newfound lease on life. Turning to the matriarch, Vikir explained that the purification process was extending from the catchment area, assuring her that the bacteria would soon vanish. The matriarch, impressed by his deeds, suggested appointing him as the tribe's shaman. Vikir, however, began to decline the offer when suddenly, the ground shook as someone slammed their foot down, causing a crack to appear. All eyes turned toward the source, revealing one of the tribe leaders. With a thunderous voice, he posed a question to the people of the deep forest. "What's the name of the hero who purified the forest?" In response, the barbarians responded with a rhythmic chant, pounding their feet on the ground and proclaiming Vikir's name. A member of the Balak tribe inquired about the person who saved their family, and the resounding response was Vikir's name. The The leader of the third tribe then questioned who brought a bright tomorrow for the deep forest, and once again, the resounding reply was the chanting of Vikir's name. The atmosphere resonated with the acknowledgement and gratitude of the tribes. A chorus of voices united in acclaim for the individual who had brought healing and hope to their home. In the mind of Vikir, the actions of the deadly Poison clan had inadvertently turned into an advantageous situation. The Baskerville clan, known for their dominance over the La Rouge et La Noire mountain, were pioneers and conquerors, but they harbored a deep-seated rivalry with the natives of the mountain. Vikir, contemplating this, couldn't help but smile sinisterly. Winning over the mountain natives, thanks to the situation created by the Poison clan, seemed like an opportunity to deal a significant blow to the entire Baskerville clan, especially Hugo. Just as he was plotting his next moves, the matriarch announced the commencement of a festival. However, Vikir interjected, signaling that there was one more critical task at hand. Both the matriarch and Ian regarded him with questioning looks. Vikir clarified his intention, emphasizing the need to identify and locate the individual responsible for spreading poison in the forest. Meanwhile, in a dark cave, another man reveled in his sinister thoughts. He felt that a lot of time had passed, so everyone should have been infected by now. He blamed the Imperial brat for the current predicament, as he wouldn't have struck a deal with the Imperial druggies if not for him. However, soon he smirked, confident that by infecting everyone and later providing the antidote, he would become the revered savior of the tribe. Ahuman reveled in his devious plan, pleased with the idea of infecting his own granddaughter, Ahul, as a masterstroke of deception. Ahuman, having emerged from the cave and rejoined the village, was met with a disconcerting reality. The villagers were bustling with activity, working happily, contrary to his expectations. Confusion gripped him as he questioned how everyone appeared fine, despite his belief that they were on the brink of suffering due to the Red Death. He had seen them gasping for air just before he commenced the ancestral rite. His bewilderment deepened as he observed Ahul, his granddaughter, cheerfully cooking food. This sight contradicted his assumptions, leading him to wonder what was happening. Driven by disbelief, Ahuman rushed toward the river, hoping to find an explanation. As he reached the riverbank, he was confronted with a startling revelation. The water was remarkably clean, allowing him to see his reflection. This raised more questions. How are the fish in the river alive? Has the river been purified, and how has the water become even clearer? Despair etched across his face. Ahuman grappled with the inexplicable turn of events. Just as the weight of his realization settled in, Vikir materialized behind him, commenting casually on the river's clarity. Startled, Ahuman recoiled and, in frustration, referred to him as an imperial bastard. Internally, he wondered when Vikir had arrived. But his shock was further intensified when he discovered that Vikir wasn't alone. A group of barbarians accompanied him. Vikir looked at Ahuman and realized that, as he had suspected, he was the culprit behind the spread of the Red Death in the forest. He then recalled that before his regression, there was a time when stories of an old man in the forest and his misdeeds were circulating. It was a horrible story of a man who had spread an infection within his tribe due to his desire to become a hero. However, in the end, he failed to cure it and ended up causing the death of most of his tribe's people. Meanwhile, Ahuman's mind raced as he tried to comprehend the situation. He refused to believe that Vikir could be aware of his devious plans. He tried to divert attention and address the gathering sarcastically, asking if everyone had come to greet the old shaman. The matriarch, however, stepped forward, questioning him about the completion of the ceremony. With feigned confidence, Ahuman asserted that the infection would soon disappear. The matriarch shared information about a war in the empire caused by the Red Death. The primary reason for this conflict was the discovery that the infection had been artificially created and deliberately spread. However, she found the whole situation perplexing, as there wasn't any connection between the Imperial clan and the Deep Forest. So this infection should not have spread in the deep forests. Ahuman, with a hesitant voice, claimed ignorance, stating that he had only come after performing the rite for the tribe's recovery. Noticing Ahuman's evasive responses, the matriarch questioned why he had come to the catchment area instead of the village. Her gaze shifted to Vikir, acknowledging that Ahuman had indeed arrived in the catchment area, thus validating his earlier statement. However, Ahuman didn't understand what both of them were talking about. The matriarch then turned back to Ahuman and said to Vikir that they should now see if whatever he had said next was also correct or not. Ahuman, now sweating profusely, couldn't help but nervously ask her about what they were talking about. The matriarch recalled Vikir's earlier assertion that Ahuman intended to use this incident to become the tribe's hero, ensuring he would definitively have the Red Death cure on him. Suddenly, a chilling aura emanated from the matriarch, causing Ahuman to tense up. She then demanded to see what was in his pouch. Vikir's mind revisited a conversation he had with Ayan some time ago, seeking insights into Ahuman's past. Ayan began unraveling the enigma of Ahuman's origins. Ahuman wasn't a native Balak. His birth and background were shrouded in mystery. Long ago, he had arrived as a slave under the dominion of the existing shaman. However, destiny took a dramatic turn when he killed the shaman plotting a coup d'etat and stole his sorcerer powers. Due to his contribution in thwarting the coup, he was elevated from a slave to a shaman. Subsequently, in order to assimilate into the Balak community, he undertook various tasks, including the unpleasant duty of cleaning up excrement. He bore the responsibility for all menial tasks within the village and even served as bait for dangerous prey during hunts. It was only as he aged, his hair turning gray, that he finally gained acknowledgement and respect within the society. In the present, as Vikir observed Ahuman, he pondered whether the aging shaman desired the privileges he had been denied in his youth. He suspected that Ahuman had overstepped the matriarch's authority in an attempt to seize control of the entire forest. The matriarch, her expression filled with anger, confronted Ahuman, demanding to see his pouch. Ahuman, visibly shaken, explained that the pouch contained flour he had saved to consume after a ceremony. As he attempted to retrieve the pouch, a mishap occurred. The pouch slipped from his grasp and tumbled into the river. Soon, the contents dissolved into the water. Ahuman, in shock, exclaimed that the old man had hand tremors, which resulted in the accidental loss of the pouch in the river. Simultaneously, the matriarch acknowledged Vikir's earlier suspicions, expressing disbelief that he would throw the pouch into the river. Vikir remarked that now they could no longer reveal the content of his pouch using the same method. Ahuman, in a fit of anger, denied having an antidote and stated that accusing him implied he was the one who had spread poison throughout the forest. He pointed an accusatory finger at Vikir, urging the matriarch to punish him for framing the honorable shaman. The matriarch agreed with his statement that you cannot frame someone without evidence. Since he believed he was innocent, she promised to protect his honor and pride. Ahuman smirked, confident that without evidence, even the matriarch would not be able to punish him. He felt untouchable. However, his confidence waned when the matriarch ordered an Iliad. An Iliad was a Balak tradition that served as a resolution for conflicts when opinions couldn't align. The victor of the Iliad was deemed competent, and the loser faced the consequences of incompetence. Ahun addressed Ahuman as grandfather and remarked that he had always emphasized the importance of tradition. The Iliad was also a tradition of Balak's, so Ahun asked him to demonstrate how to protect their traditions. Ahuman cursed him internally, but he reluctantly agreed, scheduling the Iliad for 4 days from now, during the night of the full moon. Vikir, however, challenged the time frame, asserting that tradition dictated that the recipient of the Iliad request determine the day. He then revealed his cunning plan, admitting that evidence and verification were meaningless. Cornering him into a situation where he had no choice but to request an Iliad was all part of his plan. Vikir smiled slyly and suggested initiating the Iliad immediately. Near the summit of the mountain, the Balak tribe gathered to witness the Iliad. The matriarch, presiding over the proceedings, declared the commencement of the Iliad within the warriors' circle, warning that those attempting to flee would face merciless execution by the warriors. Behind her was the warriors' mountain, housing the graves of ancestors, and since their ancestors were watching, any indecency would not be forgiven. She invoked the ancestors' judgment to decide the victor, urging the Balak warriors to prove their righteousness. Ayan, with a smile on her face, shouted encouragement to Vikir, requesting him to secure victory with a single attack. The sentiment was echoed by other members of the tribe, chanting his name. Meanwhile, Ahuman, frustrated by the apparent lack of support, bit his finger, letting a few drops of blood fall to the ground. He believed that everyone would stop chanting his name once he won, as weapons weren't the only things one could use in an Iliad. Soon, 3 skeletons emerged from the ground, and Ahuman ordered them to watch his blind spots and notify him of Vikir's movements. Armed with a bow and arrow, Ahuman smirked, confident that it was impossible for Vikir, who had only been here for 2 years, to beat someone like him, who had spent 7 years in the forest. There was no way Vikir could be more familiar with the terrain. All he needed to do was wait for Vikir to show himself, and he would shoot an arrow right through him. Unbeknownst to him, Vikir had already arrived and was hanging upside down from a tree branch behind him. Vikir pondered the utility of the silent heal skill acquired from killing the master of the swamp. It was a Mashasu skill that allowed him to silently target his prey's openings. He appreciated its ability to eliminate distracting sounds, making it particularly useful for assassins. Observing Ahuman's use of necromancy, He speculated on the possibility of him originating from Lakoko, a tribe of shamans. However, such details held little consequence for his overall strategy. With calculated precision, Vikir descended from the tree amidst the skeletons. His hand moved at an astonishing speed, leaving red slashes in its wake as the skeletons crumbled to pieces. Unaware of this swift action, Acumen maintained a smirk, believing that Vikir was paralyzed by fear. However, in an instant, Vikir materialized behind Acumen, thrusting Beelzebub into his chest. Acumen, bewildered and coughing, questioned the sudden turn of events. He hadn't even heard any footsteps on the fallen leaves. With a push, Vikir sent him sprawling to the ground, his eyes vacant. Retracting Beelzebub, Vikir stood victorious. Ayan rushed towards him, elated by the outcome. The surrounding barbarians, shocked by the swiftness of the confrontation, acknowledged the instant decision. One noted that the ancestors had deemed Acumen's words unworthy of consideration. The Iliad had reached its swift and definitive conclusion, leaving the mountain's summit in a stunned silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind. Acumen, writhing in pain on the ground, struggled with the burning sensation of his wound. Fearful of death, memories of enduring a shameful past to survive within the Balax flooded his thoughts. Unfairness overwhelmed him as he looked at Vikir, nursing a deep resentment for the things he believed were rightfully his. The Balak tribe, Lakoko, everyone who had scorned him seemed to bear the blame in his anguished perspective. Vikir, contemplating the ongoing suffering, turned to Ahun, suggesting that ending Acumen's pain might be a merciful option. However, Ahun refused to deliver the mercy since he had almost lost Ahul because of the Red Death. Even though Acumen was his grandfather, he could not forgive him and stated that a coward deserved to be in pain and wasn't worth pitying. Unbeknownst to everyone, Acumen, at death's door, was drawing something on the ground with his own blood. As he neared completion, a purple aura emanated from the ancestor's grave, and the coffin's door creaked open. Simultaneously, the sky and ground were enveloped in a dark and eerie purple energy, catching the attention of everyone present. The sudden change in atmosphere raised alarm among the witnesses. They questioned the ominous energy emanating from the grave, with Ahun, in particular, displaying shock on his face as he observed his grandfather's cryptic actions. Vikir, registering the shock on Ahun's face, turned to see Acumen on the ground. He was surprised to witness him moving, considering that he had surely stabbed his lungs. Barbarians nearby expressed their anger at Acumen, accusing him of meddling with the grave and risking the wrath of the ancestors. Acumen, now with purple eyes and an ominous aura, laughed and questioned whether he should truly be the one to fear the ancestors. Sensing something amiss, Vikir sprinted towards Acumen, urgently shouting that they needed to kill him immediately. Just as Vikir reached him, an explosion occurred, pushing him back. With a worried expression, Vikir questioned himself if he was too late. Ayan, who arrived behind him, was shocked to see the source of the blast, an arrow covered in dark energy. Acumen gazed towards a figure on the mountain and declared that, since they wished to defer the decision to the ancestors, it was now time for the great ancestors' judgment. Atop the mountain stood an undead woman wielding a bow. The message unveiled her identity as the Death Knight, with a risk rating ranging from A to S. The Death Knight was an existence that had reached the peak of their lives, but had been corrupted and transformed. They use one's soul and physical body to gather dark mana within their muscles and veins until it overflows. Ayan's eyes widened in shock as she gazed upon the Death Knight, questioning if she really was their ancestor. Meanwhile, Vikir observed Acumen's actions and contemplated the impossibility of the situation. Resurrection sorcery on a Balak ancestor. It seemed beyond the capabilities of a shaman like Acumen. His thoughts delved further, considering the unthinkable. Had he transformed himself into an undead being? Acumen summoned skeletons and questioned whether they truly believed he was a shaman living among the Balaks without any countermeasures. He then revealed that it was too early to be surprised, as there wasn't only one grave here on Warrior's Mountain. Soon, numerous Death Knights started appearing, and Acumen began to run away in his skeleton carriage while mockingly telling them to do their best in the fight against their ancestors. Ahun arrived behind him and questioned how low he was willing to go. He was about to fire an arrow at his grandfather when another arrow shattered his own. Ahun turned towards the source, discovering it was the Balak ancestor who had intervened. Suddenly, an arrow streaked from the forest, obliterating the undead ancestor's head. The matriarch, after defeating the undead, commanded everyone to prepare for battle. She enlightened the group that the figures in front of them were merely Acumen's puppets, so she urged them to kill the undead ancestors without any hesitation and prioritize survival. The gruesome battle between the Balak tribe and their undead ancestors raged on, but the situation appeared dire for the Balaks. They suffered rapid casualties against their formidable ancestors, whose strength seemed insurmountable. Amidst the chaos, an undead let out a scream, only to have her head blasted off by a precise arrow. 2 more undead met a similar fate, their heads lost to the deadly accuracy of arrows. Vikir observed the matriarch using 1 arrow per Death Knight. She skillfully dispatched Death Knights who were on par with a high-ranked graduator, showcasing the formidable strength of the Night Fox, Aquila. It dawned on him that the rumors about her protecting the forests from the Empire weren't unfounded. Turning to Ayan, Vikir expressed confidence that there wouldn't be any problem with the matriarch present. He urged Ayan to follow him. When questioned about their destination, he clarified that their objective was Ahuman. Meanwhile, Ahuman retreated from the battlefield and laughed, certain that the Balax would regret kicking him out. Suddenly, he looked at a skeleton and instructed it to handle a task. He then continued on his way,